there's a fairly large anti-feminist sentiment on the far right, and I believe that the reason that this is the case is that there are legitimate social, um, unprecedented social challenges to overcome due to the success of women. And I believe, just to be frank and clear about my position, I believe that the success of women is a good thing. I believe that women being able to compete in the marketplace is a good thing, both economically and ethically. So I certainly don't believe we should go back, but there's a large sentiment on the right that does want to go back, that does want to return to a situation where women basically accept the historic role of homemaking and men make money and just kind of go back to that old way of living. And they're trying to create that, and I think that's a bad thing for principled reasons. But from them, they're saying practically it's better for people to be able to get together. It's better for creating the family unit, which is the fundamental building block of society. And they would even argue that, regardless of what's popular with women, they would argue that women are happier and prefer men to be the breadwinners as well. As opposed to just me making their talking points for them and trying to explain their position, let's go ahead and let Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad here, make his case that feminism is a problem, and I'll chime in with my reaction.
I don't think it's going great out there, you know. I just Google percentage of young white men who support extremism, and look at the AI overview here that Google gives us. It's quite mad. I mean, they've got all the links listed with it. So rather than digging through it, I'll just give you a quick summary here, because this isn't the main thing I want to talk about. But of course, young men are most overrepresented, and of course, extreme right-wing extremism. Okay, yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that anyone ever cares about, because the system itself is an extreme left-wing globalist system, and it can accept and countenance and contain any amount of left-wing extremism, because the system will be like, look, what are you doing?
So one of the things I want to push back on is when he says the system is an extreme left-wing system. I mean, the system that we have is largely the same system that we have had for at minimum multiple decades. And then we've had conservative leaders throughout that time as well, roughly 50-50. So I don't think it's fair to characterize the current system as extreme left wing. Now, it's true that there has been a rise of wokeness, of unnecessary identity politics. I agree with that. But in terms of phrasing the core of our system as fundamentally left wing, I think that that's something that if you call yourself conservative, it doesn't feel very conservative, right? Because you start to be the one that wants to tear down the civilization that you're supposedly trying to conserve. Things like individual rights, all men, but again, the intention for that was to include, or the best interpretation of that, I will say, is to include all people, not just initially the people who could vote were white men who own property, right? So rich white men. I suppose poor white men may agree that the expanded version that includes all white men is better than the one that only includes rich white men. But for some reason, many of them have a hard time understanding that including non-white men or including women is good for the same reason that including poor white men is, as opposed to, in contrast to rich white men. So yeah, I think that the modern right will classify the system as an extreme left-wing system, but I don't think the core fundamentals of our system have changed. I think that the economic system, the economic situation has changed. Some of the social challenges of young people getting together because of those economic situations have changed. But the fundamental system is still, in my opinion, traditional Western. And I think the the right wing is looking to destroy what conservatives should be trying to conserve. And so I criticize some of the extreme left woke identity politics. You can check out my book, Good Faith Politics, Reducing Tribalism, starting from the left. I criticize the left when they want to start, radically changing and tearing down the system, but the far right is doing very similar things. And they're interpreting heritage and culture. And again, culture is important, but they will take an extreme. It's also really identity politics. It's a white identity politics. It's a nationalist identity politics. It's religious, right? And that's why it's all kind of overlapping, right? You have nationalism, you have white nationalism, you have Christian nationalism. All of this is about a common identity, and it's identity politics on the right is basically what it is. So I call it out on the left, I call it out on the right. I believe that what makes us special is our emphasis on enlightenment values, on individual rights for everyone, on freedom of religion. Those are the things that I'm proud of, not simply deciding that, oh, well, because the majority has been white, because the majority has been Christian, therefore these are the real Americans, and everyone else needs to serve. That's not how I look at things. So I'll let him continue.
Bro, pushing against an open door, or Islamic extremism, which, because of the proportion of the population, I mean, in Britain, like the Americans have an oversized view of how many Muslims are in Britain. It's 7%, which, don't get me wrong, that's like 4 million, obviously, but like that's not that many. And
7% is a lot. 7% is a lot. And this is where I think and I could have a whole conversation about this, but I think the left and the right are both correct and incorrect as it relates to the concept of people being the same. I think the left position is that, people are all the same. And then the right position is that people aren't the same. People are different. And I believe both are true. From a human nature perspective, from a capability, from a potential perspective, I don't see a significant difference in between the capabilities of any group of people, especially based on race. But from a cultural perspective, it's a mountain of difference. It is, because the culture decides what you value, it decides what you spend time on, and what you spend time on is a huge factor in terms of how you end up. And so, for instance, a quick example: if you grow up in the Black community like I have, you look at what the boys are doing. A very large percentage of them, especially all of them that show some aptitude, are playing sports. They're playing basketball, they're playing football. And what do you know? We're great at basketball and football. And if you look at other cultures, they don't play as much basketball and football. What do? Maybe they, if they're Jews or Asians or whatever, they may study a lot more. They're very competitive about their class rank. And a lot of people have the takeaway, oh, well, Blacks are just not smart and Asians are just not athletic. And, you could put white somewhere in the middle or whatever. But they'll say that and ignore the fact of how much time we spend playing sports and how much time they spend studying. And then when they're way better at studying and we're way better at playing sports, you act like it's a genetic issue. It's not it's a decision. It's a decision-based issue. So having importing a large group of people with a cultural, because there's big differences between cultures. There's cultures that, if you're gay, you get killed. There's cultures where women are basically slaves. If they get raped, they get killed for the consequence of having been like. There's just some very bad cultures out there, and to invite them into your society and expect them to be like everyone else because in theory and principle they could be the same as us, they're not. And again, this doesn't go for all of them, but there is a significant danger of importing people from a bad culture. And this is why not all immigration is the same. A lot of people will be like, okay, we need to be anti-foreign. It's like, if you can't tell the difference between some, very backward tribal, female genital mutilation African and an H-1B computer science student, like if you can't tell the difference between those, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. There's a large difference between immigrants. Our country is made better when we attract the best from around the world, and it's made worse if we bring in bad people. So there's And again, I'm not trying to. I don't think that the path forward is to necessarily generalize on the basis of a religion or race or anything like that. But um, it is true that people have different cultures. That cultures do matter, and if you bring in too many people of a bad culture, you will see the consequences. And on the flip side, if you bring in people of a good culture, and I think this is something that the far right, even just the mainstream right, honestly, underestimates, is the benefit that we get as the United States as being the premier place that everyone wants to be in the world, right? When people try to go somewhere to improve their lives, they usually come here because it's a good place to be. And what we're attracting, people tend to focus on the negative. Oh, there's takers that come here, they're lazy, XYZ. Well, let me just be frank with you. The lazy people from their countries stay in their countries on average. I'm not saying that no one who comes here um, is lazy, but I'm saying on average, the lazy. It's not that all Mexicans work hard. It's that the lazy Mexicans are in Mexico. It's not that all Asians are smart. It's that the dumb Asians stay in Asia, right? Like the H-1B students, like the people who actually have skill and ambition, they come here, and that makes us better. Um, so you can have a local self-interest bias, right? Let's say I think if you're, especially if you're a man, if you were interested in what the UFC, if you're interested in basketball, you could say, oh, okay, well, on average, statistically, the black people tend to be better at basketball. So let's just hire only black people. Like if you actually look at the NBA, some of the best players are not black. You look at Luka Doncic, you look at the Joker, Jokic. I'm not great at pronouncing his name, but there's great people who are not black, certainly foreign. You look at the UFC, right? You think most of them are American who are at the top? No, like actually very few Americans are at the top, and that's what you would expect. And I'm not saying when I say that's what you would expect. I'm not saying that the United States is bad. I'm saying that we don't have a monopoly on talent. I'm saying that there's talented, driven, ambitious, high quality people born outside of our country. As hard as that may be, unfortunately, for people to believe, there's talent elsewhere. And if you're only going to pick the best from your local area, and I pick the best of the world, and there's a competition, and economics is a competition. If it's a competition, who's going to win? You pick only your people. I pick the best from around the world. It's very clear the best from around the world will win. We want the best here. We want to be the best team, and we get a great amount of value from that. People tend to only look at the negative side of, oh, well, an American could have had that job. First off, I have, and I'm not trying to like brag or anything. I have a master's degree. I've been, I'm a software engineer. I've been in my master's degree is actually in finance, and I work as a software engineer. The point is, I'm around people. I'm in business with people that make a lot of money. That people that have a lot of skills. And in my experience, the higher you go up, the less it's American dominated. And again, part of that is culture. Part of that is the people from elsewhere, especially the top. They tend to come from cultures that really work hard, that really are competitive around growing their skills, and they're ambitious in ways that we aren't. Um, and so, and again, you would expect that the best of the best is not always going to be from your neck of the woods. They're not always going to look like you. They're going to be diverse. And I think that's why, like a lot of people on the right, they'll think that, oh, well, it's a conspiracy that academia is left wing. It's like, well, if you're looking at academia, you're looking at people with master's degrees, doctorate degrees, people that have done a lot, people at the tops of their field. And if you're at the top of your field, you think you're going to be only exposed to people who look like you? No, like you're going to have to work with people, you're going to have friends, you're going to have colleagues that are the best of the best. It's not like, if it's World War II, like, oh, only the American scientists are the good scientists. No, Germans had great scientists too. They did. If you're going to be biased, you're just going to be wrong, and you're going to be worse off and low quality. You're going to have a worse team. So as you move up, like you're not only going to be in your local neck of the woods. You're going to start meeting the best from around the world. And maybe locally, if you're the best fighter, it's all people the same color as you. As you move up, you're going to be like, whoa, those Russians they're pretty good fighters too. Some of those people from the Middle East, some of those guys are pretty good fighters too. Maybe some Asians. No, you in a way, boxing. You stereotypes you may think black guys gonna win. No, that Japanese dude, it will tear you up. And so as you move up, the best of the best, quality is not racist. There's nothing you can do. I mean, you can try to be biased towards your people, but you will lose. And we get great value by having the best of the world on our side. And people will just, unfortunately, on the right, they'll just say, "Oh, that could have been an American job." No, it couldn't. We don't have the skills. It's not like you just put an American, you know, a random American in the position of somebody who worked very hard. If that American didn't work very hard, there's no magic that goes into things. And so that's one of the things that we can move on with the video. But that's one of the things that really bothers me is people on the right, they'll look at the negative side of things. They'll say, "Oh, why do we help these countries? What do they give us?" It's like, do you not understand we're the leader of the free world? That we decide what happens? That's like a CEO complaining, "Well, why do I pay my employees? Why am I giving these people, these takers, money?" It's like, well, without these takers, if we have a CEO first company, that's not going to be a very good company because guess what? The CEO can't do everything. But the fact that we are the leader allows us to have influence, allows, for instance, the whole world agrees to use the dollar. That's the reserve currency of the world. Everybody does business in our currency. You know how much power that gives us, right? If we keep acting up and people go, United States isn't very reliable. They're violent. They're trying to take over nations. They're attacking their own allies. Why do we grant them that power? Matter of fact, let's get off the dollar, right? And again, there's tons of things that are the benefits of the leadership that people take for granted. They only look at the cost. They don't see the benefit. They only look at, oh, it's a foreign person here and they're making money, so maybe we couldn't have made money, where they don't realize that logistically we don't have the talent to fill those positions anyway. Like, let me give you an example, right? So let's say we have 1,000 planes that need to fly, okay, 1,000 of them, and we need 1,000 pilots who know how to fly the plane. And let's say the U.S. is overrepresented in the best pilots, right? And relative to our population of Earth, right? And let's say that of the top 100 pilots, Americans have the top 30. Okay, but if there's only 300 American pilots, we got 1,000 planes to fly. What do you what do you suppose we do, right? Like now we can. I'm happy to try to increase the amount of pilots, but until we do have the quantity of pilots, are we just not going to fly planes? We're going to need to bring the pilots from elsewhere. That's how it works. It's not like you can just plug unskilled Americans who have not put in the time and effort required to have the skill to do a lot of these advanced jobs. You can't just plug people in like that. I'd prefer it to be American, but I'd rather land the plane safely than hire an American that can't land the plane safely. So I'll go ahead and move forward on this.
It's not the predominant culture that we live within. So the system can contain that. But right-wing extremism, well, that could be many, many millions of people across the country. And so they're very, very worried about that. And so obviously this is a massive issue. But you'll notice right-wing extremism is only 19% of referrals where an ideology is specified. The second highest proportion, I wonder what the first highest proportion is. 42 of those cases were related to 42% of these cases were related to extreme right-wing ideology. But the thing is, they're 19% of the referrals, but 42% of the cases that they take on. That's interesting, isn't it? Apparently, incels are an issue, but this is a lot of young people. So 11 to 15 account for the largest proportion of referrals across categories of concern, and the average age of youth extremists is found to be 17. Now, I can't help but wonder how much of this is very online left-wing women teachers who have watched Adolescence recently and are just like, oh my God, I know some boys like that in my class. And
I'm curious about Adolescence. I've never seen that. So I wonder what the stereotype is for young men. Now, I'm not a fan of making young men out to be villains. I'm not a fan of anybody being villains. Let me rephrase that. I'm not afraid of any group of people being defined as villains. Individuals, if you are a villain, then call a spade. But to say young men are bad or white people are bad or black people, none of that is any good.
So they're referring them, and I don't know, maybe a lot of them are being picked up. Who knows? But this is a perennial problem they have. And you'll notice here it says, well, look, radicalization is not limited to a single background, but there are common vulnerabilities. But this is an issue, isn't it? It's like there's no one particular place that this kind of radicalization comes from, because it is the system itself that is set up against young white men. And so I found this article.
So this victim mindset is interesting to me. Now, in their defense, right? If you are a young white man and you're looking at stuff like affirmative action, DEI, I can understand feeling like, oh, the system's against us. And I'm not saying that those are good things, but you got to be strong. You got to be tough. Like the system has been against black folks quite a bit, right? We get one little, a few little programs, a few little legs up here and there, and all of a sudden, white people are the victim. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's correct to disadvantage any group. I'm saying that, and this is advice I would give black folks as well. Even if it is unfair against you, you still got to handle your business. You still got to do what you're supposed to do. The world isn't fair, and again, I'm not saying that justifies unfairness, but it's a reality that you will have to put in work, and it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be granted to you. Um, it's difficult for me to feel a lot of sympathy for like white people being a victim given history and the fact that black people didn't even get civil rights till 1964. And then, want to feel bad for white people for affirmative action existing in certain cases. So again, I'm not saying I do understand how they would feel that way. Like if there's a box to check for race and they know that they're not going to get any benefit for being white. I understand that there are situations where it would feel bad. But we've all been there, and we can still have a conversation about that. But it's hard for me to really get my heartstrings worked up. It's we've all been there, and it's been much worse for other groups.
The other day, where the article itself is on a site called Notesa, I'd never heard of, but they're using they're sourcing this from a University of Melbourne research paper that found almost 40% of Australian teenage boys support right-wing violent extremism, and 1/3 white supremacist violent extremism. Just, I mean,
that's a big number. If you're talking 40%, 30%, but I'm curious how they define those terms.
That's a very large set of numbers. And if you were the government, you're like, how is it the case that nearly 40% of Australian teenagers, the boys, support right-wing violent extremism? I mean, if you took violent out of that, is that more than 50%? If they're like, yeah, we support right-wing extremism, just not the violent kind, obviously. How much further up does that go? But I like the fact it's Dr. Sarah Merger here. It's like, obviously, it's the woman from Adolescence who's conducting the research. I don't know anything about it, by the way. I'm just guessing, joking. But they surveyed 1,100 boys and girls aged 13 to 17 and 2,300 adult men and women. And the respondents were asked if they disagreed or agreed with a range of statements, including society demonizes whiteness today, so violent resistance is the only way for white people to have a fair chance in the world. And to determine whether they supported different types of so-called extremism, a quarter of the boys supported every form of violent extremism identified in the survey. 39% supported.
Yeah, that is rough. And here's the thing, like when you feel like, and I think this is a problem where it's not a fringe issue. And it's not even, I think that the left makes the mistake often of thinking that the people on the right, especially the far right, thinking that they're evil, thinking that they are psychopathic or whatever. And if you start talking about numbers like 40%, 30%, I promise you it's not psychopathic, it's not evil. If you're looking at real antisocial, psychopathic types of people, Machiavellian, the dark triad type stuff, there you're talking for psychopaths, maybe 1% of the population. Sure, for boys it'd be larger than 1%, but it's never going to be like 40%, right? Now, the reason I say that is 40% still may support violence. And if you are incorrect about certain things, then you can have a violent response that is reasonable given your misunderstanding. And I don't want to. There's a video's already getting long, but I don't want to dive into the Great Replacement theory too much, but the Great Replacement theory and immigration is one of the largest political issues, especially in the 2024 election. Immigration was a big deal, and then the right wing, pretty much mainstream story on immigration is that it's an intentional great replacement of white people. It's an intentional, basically anti-white genocide. And who would be behind the genocide in this story? Well, that's where the anti-Semitism comes in. And so, like, it can feel like all of these boys are just little evil demons when you look at 40% of them want to commit violence. But answer this yourself: if you sincerely believed that your people were intentionally being genocided against, being taken out, right? They're trying to end people like you from existence at a mass scale. Would you not be willing to use violence in defense of that? And I promise you, most people, if their people are being genocided, violence will be an answer. So I don't think that um, I don't think it's that they're evil. I think it's that they have been convinced. Honestly, they have been convinced that they are actually targets of hostile, violent, genocidal actors. And if that's true, then violence is not unreasonable. And this is where religion is dangerous as well, because if it's true, then extremism is not unreasonable. People like to criticize, oh, well, why do you look at the extremist version of religion? Why not look at the more moderate version? It's like, well, religion is so important. We're talking about infinity. We're talking about eternal heaven or eternal punishment in hell, right? These are not moderate scenarios that we're discussing here. These are the most extreme differences that you could fathom, which is the difference between infinite forever bliss and happiness and infinite forever torture. Um, and so when you put someone in an extreme situation, then extreme behavior is not unreasonable. And if these people believe that they are actually being targeted, that they're actually victims, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because the right criticize the left. Oh, you guys are all just trying to play the victim, and you guys are all trying to play identity politics. And it's like the right is doing the exact same thing. They're trying to play victim, and they're playing white identity politics. That's exactly what's going on the far right.
Right wing types, followed by white supremacists on 29%, anti feminists on 28%, left wing was 28%. Interesting, that, isn't it? Even the left is quite radicalized. Incel at 25% and religious base at 21%. Who knows what the demographic breakdown of the people that they interviewed was. For girls, 17% supported all forms of violent extremism listed. That's quite remarkable.
I'm curious what the violent extremism on the left for those kids was about. Like, is it just like is it in opposition to the right wing? Like what are they mad about? Like, I have no idea.
30% of the girls supported right wing extremism. It's interesting. That's quite high. Women don't tend to normally support right wing extremism, do they? 21% for left wing extremism, 21% for anti feminist extremism, 19% for white supremacist extremism, blah, 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 right? Weirdly, 17.5% for incels. Women for incel terrorism. What are we like? What?
Yeah, I don't know what that means. Yeah, most if women want to solve their incel problems, there's usually plenty of plenty of males that are happy to help them solve that.
The research found that almost a quarter of the 661 teenage boys surveyed exhibited radicalizing intent. 18% sympathized with radical violence and 10% harbored violent intent. Man, so the reason I'm talking about this is that this is something that genuinely has to be gotten a handle on. And I think the best way to do that is by addressing the issues, right? It is clear that a large number of young people right now feel that they're being dispossessed, feel that they're being governed by a system they don't think is legitimate and is not serving their interests. And the only way back from this that prevents any kind of ridiculous violence or any terrorism or whatever is to actually address these issues, right? Because actually, it is not unreasonable to think, oh, maybe I should be respected as a boy or as a man in society. Actually, maybe I shouldn't just be browbeaten and kicked down. Actually, it's not fair to do this and then benefit others at my expense. Right? That's actually it's the way that society is set up at the moment that is deeply unfair. Now, a lot of people say, well, this is about the feminized society and mass immigration. And honestly, are they wrong? Is it wrong to suggest that because society is being run along feminine lines, young men are like, I don't agree with this. I don't like the way things are going. And of course, they're watching the immigration happen.
So here's the thing about the society being run along feminine lines. Even though it's true that young women are doing better than young men in the marketplace, most of the levers of power are still wielded by men, white men. To be fair, to be frank with you, you could argue that Jews have an influence, but their population is so small. Even if they're rich, it's not like they're going to be in most of the positions. So it's still a white man's world. I mean, you can you're acting like it's or he's acting like it's a largely feminine world, and if it is a feminine world, it's a feminine world that men have willed into existence or are allowed to exist. Because again, even though on the young people side of things, for people that are working through the education system, people are trying to get skills and jobs and everything, like these are like just normal people trying to have a reasonable middle class life. Well, women, especially young women, are doing quite well. As you move up society, you're looking at CEOs, politicians, people with big influence in the public and private sector. It's still a man's club, right? I mean, there's just more women there than ever before, but it's still largely a male club. And honestly, I don't think that's ever going to change. This may be a controversial take with people on the left, um, but I believe that uh, the very bottom of your society is going to be very heavily male in terms of like the worst people, the worst criminals, the worst alcoholics, the worst drug addicts. That's always going to lean male. I also believe that the best of the best will tend to lean male as well, for different reasons. But I think it's a cultural thing about I believe that a larger percentage of men are going to know life, try hard, go extreme towards excellence, right? More men are going to have that Kobe Bryant, I'm the best. You can't touch me. I am going to defeat everybody. And if you get close to my level, I'm going to practice that much harder to take you out, right? I think more men are going to have that mentality to women. Now, a woman could have that mentality. She may be the best, better than all the men. I'm just saying that there's going to be more men that try extremely hard on average, right? And so, for instance, and again, I'll try to make this quick, but I remember watching a female chess tournament. And I asked myself, I said, why am I watching a female chess tournament? Not because the chess was bad, right? All the women were clearly significantly better than me at chess. But, I'm not going to understand the, female weightlifting, female sprinting, right? The men are clearly going to be better and have an advantage on those physically demanding sports. But I don't see why men would have an advantage in chess. I don't think you don't have to be strong to play chess. I don't believe that men are by definition smarter than women. The only thing that makes sense to me, and I don't know if it's true, but this would be my best guess, is the percentage of young men who decide to dedicate their entire lives to being the best in the world at chess. And you got to try to be the best in the world to have a chance to get there, right? There's probably way more men that dedicate their entire lives to chess than women, right? And if there's hypothetically 10 men who dedicate their entire lives to chess, or 10 young boys that dedicate their entire lives to chess for every one young girl that does it, and then there's 8 times as many men at the top as women, well, that would mean women are better than men at chess. They'd be overrepresented, right? If we tried 10 times, 10 times many of us tried, and we're only 8 times as prevalent, well, then they'd actually be better, even though it'd still be by and large, almost, a very large majority of men at the top. But anyway, the heads of our society are not run by women. They're run by men, and if it is feminine, it's men who choose to allow that to happen.
As well, I'm thinking, God, what kind of future have I got? And they're only teenagers, man. Like, when I was a teenager, none of these things was something I thought about because they were just not part of my life. Things were normal. It wasn't evident that the system hated me and was determined to replace me. And I wasn't being hectored and essentially
So again, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but like it's just funny to me, like as a black guy, I think like the system hated me. It's like the system literally owned, like we were 3/5 of a person. We didn't have rights till the 1960s. And talk about replacing it, like they didn't even let us in. Like forget replacement, we weren't even in to get replaced. So yeah, it's, and again, I'm not saying that the anti to be anti-white is good. To be anti any race is bad. It's just interesting to see like the little things that happen to white people, the small scale of it compared to what happened to plenty of other groups. And then now all of a sudden they want to tear down their own systems. This is their country. Like this is, when I say it's their country, like this is the country a lot of them founded. The rules that exist, a lot of them are the ones that made the rules, right? So like, and as soon as basically there starts to be some effort towards fairness, and again, I do think it goes a little too far, right? The left has villainized white people more than, I mean, they shouldn't do it at all. And then the fact that that's happening on the woke left is a bad thing. But if you're looking at in terms of like the scale of what we've gone through, as Black Americans, as other types of Americans, what's going on with white people? I mean, you got they still run everything, right? So now again, not the average white man. Right? I'm not saying the average white man that you see on the street runs everything, but nobody, the average of nobody runs everything, right? So you'd have to compare to other groups of people, and if you're comparing groups of people, it's in terms of who has the wealth and power and the quantity, right? If you look at per capita, you can say, okay, well, maybe it's Asians and Jews, but if you look at the just total quantity, it's still largely ran by white folks. So, yeah, it's. I'm not saying it's a good thing to be, to have any anti-white sentiment. I criticize the woke left all the time for that, but it's just how sensitive and fragile they are is interesting.
Persecuted by a bunch of women teachers and authority figures. There were still male authority figures around who at least had some understanding of what it was like to be a teenage boy. And yet, like, if this is the case in Australia, man, that's pretty wild, isn't it? That's pretty wild. Dr. Merger said her research showed strong and significant correlations between anti-feminist views and support for violent extremism, and described the proportion of boys who held both violent extremist and misogynist views as disturbingly high. Well, yeah, but look at the situation they're in. Like, they don't see a future, and you're like, that's a problem. It's worse than I expected. The results of our survey are pretty harrowing, and I think they show a real societal problem. No kidding, but what can be done about it? You've got to ask yourself, what is the appropriate...
Right, and the problem is a lot of the answer that those kids have, and a lot on the far right have, is we need to return to the way things were before, where women basically don't have rights. Nick Fuentes, your body, my choice forever. Like this is some. You say that to me, I'll put you in the dirt, right? Like this is not a joke. This is some quite violent and evil stuff. Again, the men who are saying that, they may not feel that way, but imagine somebody said that to them. Imagine again any little bitty thing that's happening to them, and they feel like they're the biggest victims on earth. White men are the biggest victims on earth. They're playing the victim card, like they criticize us playing the victim card, and at the same time they're playing the victim card, they're trying to take away basically the human rights of half the species, right? And like so, like again, imagine they tried to do that. You imagine they said men shouldn't be able to work. Imagine they say, you got to go in the kitchen and do what the women say. Now they would say, oh, well, that's not natural. You can say whatever you want to say, but from an individual, enlightenment value perspective that again our nations were founded upon, you can't defend that. You can't defend that level of human disrespect. You can't do it. And even think, if a lot of them are religious, you think God wants you to straight up own other people, that you think God is a Christian nationalist, a white nationalist, that you think that the people who aren't white are shitholes, who thinks that women need to listen to men no matter what because of reasons. I really can't. I mean, I'm not religious, but that doesn't even make sense to me from an ethical perspective, from their supposed spiritual perspective. But it does make sense from a self-interest perspective. Things aren't as great as we'd like. Therefore, other people need to serve us and have their freedoms taken away. It's like, okay, I see what you're doing.
Place in society for straight white men. And if you can't say X, Y, or Z, if you don't have an appropriate place for them, well, then you can't fix the problem, can you? It's going to have to be someone else who comes up with a solution here. People are just frustrated. They're aggrieved. They want radical change, but they don't have a coherent ideology of what the source of the problem is and what the solution is. Resistance to feminism is what they all agree on. Okay, I think that is the key then, isn't it? They're sick of women being advanced just because they're women. They're sick of
No, women are not being advanced because they're women. Women are being advanced because they're better. And when I say better, I don't mean better holistically. So, for instance, now I may have said this before, I'll try to be quick. If the primary way people are earning income is through high physically demanding labor, working in an automobile factory, working as a farmer, working the land, working in the coal mine, steel mills, carrying lumber back and forth, chopping down trees, hunting, running, fishing, right? If that's what people are doing to survive, if that's what people are if those are the kind of jobs people are doing to earn an income, men are better than women at that, and that's fact. That's true, and people on the right will understand that that's true. That we are better. But on the other hand, if society and the economy is not based on strength, men's advantage disappears. It disappears. Now we're even, right? Now we're even, but we haven't talked about what women are better than us at, right? Obviously, we're stronger. And again, this is all aggregate, right? Clearly, every individual, just women that are stronger than men at an individual level. There's, men who are more feminine at individual levels. But one of the things that I believe has always been true is I think young women are more reliable and responsible and more likely to do what they're told and what they're supposed to do. And that will take you far in a service economy. Show up to class, do your homework. Doesn't matter how smart you are, do your work, do what you're supposed to do, move through the system, participate in the system, get yourself a reasonable middle class job. Women are better than at us than that. I believe that that's always been the case. The difference is the economy only recently has rewarded that. Only recently has the strengths of women actually paid off in the economy. In the past, all of those things didn't matter if the only way you made money was by, carrying lumber and chopping down trees and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, men are just better by doing nothing, just being men and using brute strength. But once the economy is not about brute strength anymore, our benefit goes away. And when they compete with us and they win, that's not a bias problem. It's not again, there's so much victimhood here. There's so much, like, imagine it's like black people do the same thing, like, oh, well, and again, some black people do the same thing, and they're very quick to criticize it and say, oh, well, the only reason that, we're not achieving the same amount as them is because the system's holding us down. It's because they're advancing white people over black people. And in some cases, that's true. And again, in some cases, there may be certain programs that are female only. There's individual cases. But the aggregate is not a discrimination problem. The aggregate is a decision-making problem. It's a cultural problem. That's what it is. And if they're taking life more seriously from a younger age, they're going to progress faster. They're going to get better jobs sooner. Then they're going to have more experience. They're going to outcompete us. It's not a that you know the system is biased towards women. It's that they're outcompeting us in the market, and that's how it's supposed to work in a free market. Stop complaining. Take your own advice.
feminine dominated society, and a very large number of them don't want it to be this way. And they are literally getting to the point, as you say, where they're like, yeah, I'm happy to completely happy to countenance violent extremism is getting away from the matriarchy. It's like, okay, man, that's pretty wild. And you would think, you'd be like, okay, well, are we doing something wrong? Say the women and feminists in charge. Is it us that is doing something here? And of course, we get no such introspection whatsoever. But both boys and girls are getting very consistently strong anti-feminism message. Yeah, but from where? From their own lived experience in the world, right? They're watching, or they're watching the life around them. They're like, I'm not sure it should be this way. They're watching, white liberal women in Minnesota howling and screaming about the ICE kidnapping, ICE deporting a bunch of Somali fraudsters in Minnesota. It's like, what the hell am I talking about here? What is going on? This is nonsense. This shouldn't be happening. But girls are subjected to almost misogynistic content online as boys, and have also received a societal-wide message that feminism has gone far enough and maybe even too far. Okay.
No, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with has gone far enough. And I think that's a problem that liberals have, is that we will take something where we have pretty solid ground, um, and then just keep going, right? And so let's say early on, let's give credit to Abraham Lincoln, a Republican from back in the day. It's like, hey, slavery is not cool. We shouldn't be doing that, right? And in that case, you're supporting black people, and that's the right thing to do. And then you keep going forward. It's okay, yeah, slavery is outlawed, but there's still Jim Crow. There's segregation. We don't get loans, and there's different rules for different races. Yeah, we still need to support black people. That's not right either. Then it's like, okay, well, yeah, we outlaw Jim Crow, but technically they don't have rights. Okay, let's give them civil rights. Okay, they have civil rights, but it's still okay to redline housing districts and keep them in poor areas and X, Y, Z. Yeah, it's still right to support black people, right? So like now, is the redlining as bad as slavery? Not at all, right? It's way better to deal with redlining problems than slavery problems, right? But then as you keep going forward, and it's like, well, maybe there's microaggressions and unconscious bias, and we gotta like. It's like once you start, you go that far, it's like, all right, there's that's enough. Like at a certain point, you got to be done, right? And so for feminism, it's like if they have equal rights, if it's illegal to discriminate against them in the marketplace, there's punishments for discriminating against them. There's punishments for discriminating against unique women, things like their status of being pregnant. Right? If they have all the equal rights and discriminating against them is against the law, then what more do we need? Right? Like, so I do think there's a reasonable conversation to have about, you can't just be pro black forever, no matter what. You can't just be pro women forever, no matter what. Is there a problem? Solve the problem. Once the problem solved, then you got to stop asking for new stuff. And I think that's the problem with woke, is we just kept asking for more and more and more when we already got what's reasonable in a lot of those cases. And if you keep pushing for unreason, then the right is going to have a legitimate pushback.
Well, have you considered that? Let me advance the thesis that actually infinite feminism is not a good thing. Actually, it's not good for society to dispossess young boys, privilege young women, and make them think that make one think they have no place at all, and make the other think that they are the only people who actually matter. Have you considered that's not a good thing? Like, we're still struggling with the catastrophic downstream consequences of feminism, and there's no reflection on the part of the people doing this. It's absolutely mad. Honestly, it's genuinely mad, and it's very frustrating. But on the
Well, I think there doesn't have to be an equivalence between being pro women and being anti men. So I would stand with them against any type of sentiment that boys are bad, and like any yeah, I mean that's ridiculous. Everybody deserves respect. Everybody has a place in society if they behave properly. Um, so yeah, I do think that there's a minority on the left. This is not a majority, but there's a minority on the left that does take a pro-feminist stance and turn that into an anti-men stance. Likewise, there's a percentage on the left that will take a pro-diversity stance and turn it into an anti-white stance. Right? As soon as you start getting anti groups of people, you messed up. But also in terms of the superiority, if you think that women are better, men are just dogs and women are so pristine, right? Like you start getting into that superiority by definition stuff. And again, and you basically invite the opposite. So there's certainly people that go too far.
plus side, at least a large number of young people like, right, it is feminism is the problem. It is feminism, and there is loads of other things that follow from this, obviously, but at least primarily they've understood that feminism is the bedrock of what is destroying society. Islander 5 is now on sale. The current theme is heroism and...
Okay, I'll go ahead and end it there. It's already been a long video, but final thing I'll say is it's true that there are new challenges that come with the success of women, but we're not going back. And if you do go back, it's going to be very ugly, like those young. And I don't know exactly what they believe, but like the people from that survey, right? The only way you're going back is with some very ugly violence and return to, you know, some places where you don't want to be. Almost reminds me of like Handmaid's Tale. Not that I've watched it, but I've heard about it.